Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel. Now, today we're going to talk about a very famous Canadian case, and this actually took place a long time ago. I believe it was in the 80s, and at the time, it was one of the most notorious, one of the biggest cases. It was just so shocking as to how something like this could happen in the middle of the day with so many people in the environment where this happened. Now, before we get into today's video, obviously, I just want to send a quick reminder to please consider subscribing if you guys enjoy this type of content. We post 2 to 3 times a week and we talk about stuff like true crime, unsolved mysteries, and the paranormal. Now, today's case reminds me a little bit of one that we did earlier in the year about Asha Degree. It was about a 9-year-old girl that decided to run away early in the morning where it was very, very dark outside. And the last time anyone saw her was her walking along the highway and then completely vanished. There's been minimal clues about her whereabouts. And to this day, her family has absolutely no idea what happened to Asha or even where she is. Now, this case that we're going to talk about reminds me a little bit about this case. And today's case is actually about a little girl called Nicole Morin. To give you a little bit of a summary, Nicole at the time was an 8-year-old girl. She was very small, very young. And somewhere between her penthouse apartment, her and her mom lived at the very top of the apartment, and the front lobby of the apartment, Nicole vanished and no one has seen her since. And there have been absolutely no clues as to what happened to her, where she went, if someone could have taken her. There's literally been nothing in this case. So Nicole was born on April 1st, 1977 to Jeanette and Arthur Morin. And they actually lived in Etobicoke, which is actually a suburb area of Toronto. Now, the date Nicole disappeared was actually July 30th, 1985. And I know this was the 80s and this was a long time ago. And the way things are then and they are now are actually quite different. Parents were more inclined to trust other adults to watch their children. They just thought people were nicer in general. So they didn't have these high walls up. And they also gave their children more responsibility at a younger age. Even in the 90s, I remember when I was 10, 11 years old, I had much more responsibility than from what I see 10 or 11-year-olds having today. So it wasn't uncommon for children like Nicole and Nicole's age to have the responsibility and the authority to move around on their own without adult supervision 24/7. So like I said earlier, Nicole and her mother actually lived in the penthouse apartment of her building complex, and her father were actually separated at the time, and her father lived in Mississauga, which is right next to Etobicoke and is also another suburb of Toronto. Now, on the day Nicole went missing, she actually had gone down to the lobby early in the morning at approximately 10:30 a.m. Now, it was a 20-floor trip from the penthouse down to the lobby where she was seen picking up the mail and then going back upstairs. Later that day at 11 a.m., Nicole actually had a play date scheduled for later that morning. Like I said, at 11 a.m., her friend, who also lived in the building complex, was going to wait for her down in the lobby, and their plan was to spend the day at the pool. So at 11 a.m., Nicole's friend goes to the intercom. And if you grew up in the 90s, I'm sure there's still some buildings that were built in the 80s and the 90s that are like this. You would have to go through a front set of doors from the building entrance, and there would be like a little intercom place where you have to dial a number and then you could speak to the person there. And then there would be another set of doors where that person would have to buzz you in. Anyhow, Nicole's friend went from the lobby, since she lived in the same building, she went from the lobby into that area where the intercom was to see if Nicole was ready for her play date. So she dials the code and calls up to her apartment. She speaks to Nicole and she lets her know that she's coming right down, that she was just going to grab her stuff and she'll be there any minute. So Nicole's friend goes back into the lobby and waits for her. So at 11 a.m., Nicole's mother, Jeanette, remembers seeing Nicole leaving for her play date. And she was last seen wearing a peach bathing suit, a green headband, red canvas shoes, and a plastic bag that held some other little things that she was bringing down to the pool, including her purple beach towel. Now, Nicole's mom didn't really think anything could happen to her. She was literally going downstairs from her apartment to the elevator, down the stairs to meet her friend that was waiting for her right in front of the elevators. But after 15 minutes went by, Nicole's friend started to get worried. She was wondering where she was because the last time she spoke to her, she said she would literally be right down. So 15 minutes goes by and Nicole's friend actually decides to buzz up to her apartment again. And this time her mother answers, Jeanette. And she tells her that Nicole left and that she'll probably be down there any second, that she probably got distracted or maybe she actually went to the pool already and that her friend just didn't see her. It's also important, and this is actually a controversial part of the story, that Jeanette's mom was actually running a home daycare at the time. And she had several young children in her apartment when Nicole went down to her play date. So after hearing from Nicole's friend the first time saying that Nicole wasn't anywhere to be found, her mom wasn't too worried. She kind of dismissed it. She thought it was probably just an oversight that they didn't see each other when Nicole got down there. And it's said and it's speculated that Nicole's mom was also kind of distracted and not really too focused on Nicole's whereabouts because she had all of these other children to care for at the time. So time continues to go on and Nicole's mom doesn't hear back from her friend. So at this point, she assumes that the girls found each other and that they're just having a good time at the pool. It's not really understood as to why Nicole's younger friend didn't decide to buzz up again when she couldn't find Nicole. That is kind of all over the place. From what I saw online, it said that maybe she thought that Nicole just decided not to come down that day, that she didn't want to keep bothering her mom, maybe that Nicole got distracted with other plans. There's not really a solid answer as to why her friend didn't continue looking for her. So 3 p.m. comes around and Jeanette is starting to get a little bit worried. You know, it's been 4 hours and she hasn't heard from Nicole. Now, some people say that 4 hours is totally normal if you're playing down in the pool, you're a young kid, you just want to spend the day having fun. And then other people say that that is a little bit of a suspicious amount of time to not hear from your kid again. They probably are tired. They might get hungry at this point. So Jeanette at 3 o'clock, she starts to get worried. And what she does next is a little bit controversial as well. She was actually babysitting a child that was a little bit older. It's not said exactly how old this kid is. I'm assuming he was maybe like 12 years old. And she actually sent him down to the pool to go see if he could spot Nicole. He comes back up and tells Jeanette that he didn't see her, that he looked across the pool area and he did not see Nicole anywhere. So Jeanette, thinking that he probably just missed her, that he didn't see her, she asks him to go down to the pool and check again. So he goes and he comes back upstairs and he tells her the exact same thing. Nicole is not at the pool. Now, for unclear reasons, I really did try to look everywhere as to why Jeanette did what she did, but Jeanette didn't call the police for several more hours. And it wasn't even Jeanette that called the police. It was, I believe it was the superintendent or the manager of the building that actually called the police at 6 p.m. after Jeanette started asking people where Nicole was and everyone started to get worried. So it wasn't even her own mother that called the police. It was someone else that called them at 6 p.m. And now at this time, it had been 7 hours since Nicole was last seen. So 7 hours is a very, very large window for someone to take a child and do whatever they wanted to do with them. They could have gone to so many different places. They could have done so many different things. So right away, obviously, the police go into full-on investigation mode and start looking throughout the entire building. It was said that no door was left unlocked. They went through 429 units of the apartment complex. They looked high and low. They checked the basement. They checked the roof. They checked all of the staff areas where only certain people had access to. They really went through that entire building and they found zero clue as to where Nicole could have been. There were also several roadblocks set up, and these were set up in the surrounding area of the neighborhood, and police were stopping. They were looking in certain cars. They were talking to residents of the area, passing around flyers. They were really doing the most to find Nicole. Now, eventually, they actually did come across one woman. And there's not a lot of information about who she is. All that I was able to find is that they spoke to a woman, and she, after seeing a photo of Nicole, was able to confirm that she did see Nicole in the lobby at approximately 11 a.m. So that confirms a timeline for us that Nicole actually did make it down to the lobby. The next day, the search continued, but it also expanded, and it included Highway 27, which was not too far away from the apartment building. And this time, there were over 300 neighbors searching high and low for Nicole. There were thousands of pictures posted everywhere with Nicole's picture on it. There was even a $1,000 reward at the time, and police even created a reenactment video. I'll put it up if I can find it here.
On that morning, at approximately 11 a.m., Nicole left her penthouse apartment at 627 the West Mall, Etobicoke, to meet a friend in the lobby, intending to go swimming. She said goodbye to her mother for what would be the last time and disappeared without a trace. She was never seen again. Police believe she was taken. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Nicole Morin, call Toronto Police or report anonymously to Crime Stoppers.
With all this effort and all of this searching, it was actually Toronto's largest search investigation ever conducted. And even with all this manpower behind it, they had no idea what could have happened to Nicole. After the first year, the reward was actually increased from 1,000 to 10,000, and still there was nothing. That didn't really help the cause at all. Now, this next part I find to be rather eerie, and I'm very torn as to the context of this. So when the police were searching the apartment where Nicole lived, they actually were looking in her room, and they came across a small note, and it was in Nicole's handwriting. And in this note, it said, "I'm going to disappear." Now, Jeanette, Nicole's mother, had absolutely no idea what to make of this note. She had no idea Nicole had written anything like this, and the police were completely baffled. They had no idea. First of all, why would a young child write something like this? Was this her imagination? Did she know something that no one else knew? Was she being groomed into a certain plan that she wasn't telling anyone? So this led to a lot of theories, and people are completely stumped as to why Nicole would have written something like this. So obviously, in a case so mysterious like this, the theories are numerous. So right away, the police were able to clear Jeanette and her father, Arthur. Her father was out in Mississauga at the time, and Jeanette was up in the daycare when this happened. So both parents were cleared right away. Approximately 45 minutes before Nicole actually went missing, there was a neighbor on the 20th floor that actually said they saw a woman standing in the hallway, not really talking to anyone. She was just really standing there, and it looked out of place to them. All they remember is that this woman was holding a notebook at the time. So with this information, police tried searching for this woman. They even pulled call to actions on TV, on the news, everywhere they could, asking for this woman to please come forward, that she wasn't in trouble, that they just wanted to talk to her to see if she knew any information that would help the investigation. Unfortunately, this didn't help. They were never able to locate this woman. Now, there is another theory actually that goes back to when Nicole went missing, but unfortunately, this wasn't looked into seriously until 2014, and it's actually about the Horseshoe Valley theory. So on October 28, 2014, Crime Stoppers actually received a follow-up tip on a tip that was submitted back not too long after Nicole went missing. It was actually a few days after Nicole went missing that this tip originally came in. But it wasn't until 2014 when it was actually taken seriously. This tip actually came in from another child named Billy Joe, and they actually lived up north in Barrie. It's about 2 hours from Toronto, from downtown Toronto. So from Etobicoke, I would say it's probably closer to 2.5 hours. Anyways, this kid called into the police, and what he said next was quite shocking. 2 days after Nicole went missing, Billy said that he heard screams of what sounded like a little girl coming from the woods surrounding his home. Now, what makes this super credible is that the neighbors were also able to confirm that they heard the exact same thing. It actually happened when Billy Joe and his mother were out feeding the horses, and they were about to head into the home for the night. And that's when they heard these very loud pitched, high screams coming from the woods. And it sounded like it was a little girl. And she was screaming, "Stop, please, you're hurting me." And then complete silence. Billy's mom at the time suspected that it must have been the little girl from Toronto that was currently missing, but unfortunately, they did call the police, but nothing came from that lead at the time. It wasn't until 2014 when an extensive search was done on the area. And even though they did search the area in 2014, they brought dogs in, they brought in technology, they didn't really find anything credible to say that it was Nicole or that there was any sort of crime committed in this area at all. Now, the second theory is that Nicole was actually kidnapped and sold into human trafficking. In 2014, there were some suggestive photos of Nicole discovered on a website. It was actually a Dutch website called Zandvoort, something like that. And this website was actually known to be a hotspot for sick individuals that liked looking at children in these vulnerable positions. So at the time, these photos were brought to the attention of a company or an organization that was doing research on human trafficking and rescuing children from these sort of situations. It was actually called the Foundation of Croix and Massimo Lancelotti. And when they got these photos, they actually ran a biometric scan comparing the photo on the internet versus one of Nicole. Now, what this biometric scan did was that it measured certain parts of the faces that don't change no matter how old you get, how much weight you gain. And an example of this would be the space between both of your pupils. That's something that's not going to change regardless what you do to your face. Now, the way the system works is that it goes on a point scale. And as long as you're considered to be under 300,000 points, the photos are considered to be a match. The photos that they compared of the girl and Nicole had a difference of 285,429 points, which actually meant that this was a very, 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 very likely match to be Nicole. I really did try to find the photos that were posted on the website. Apparently, they were not suggestive photos of Nicole. They were kind of just an image of her face, but they were taken down. So I'm not able to share those with you guys. Now, initially, many people thought that this meant Nicole had been kidnapped and sent to the Netherlands. But the way this website works is that you don't necessarily have to be in the Netherlands to do this. It could have been someone that was a member of this website and that still lived in Toronto and just had Nicole and had taken pictures of her and then uploaded them to the website. So that didn't really help in narrowing down the search for her. So it's possible, and there are a lot of theories suggesting this, that this entire thing was planned around the idea of kidnapping Nicole and selling her into basically human trafficking. Now, there's a lot of people saying that, seeing this little girl walking around independently, someone could have been very familiar with her schedule. Maybe they knew that her mom let her go around on her own a lot. It's not very hard to spot someone in an apartment complex, especially if you live in it or if you live in the area, and, kind of start talking to them, gain their trust a little bit, and eventually just attack them when they're not expecting it. The next theory is that Nicole was an unfortunate victim of a crime of opportunity. Now, basically, what this means is that Nicole was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Someone could have spotted her in the elevator and lured her away, or someone could have spotted her in the lobby alone and then lured her away. There's a lot of traffic in lobbies and apartment buildings. There could have been maintenance workers, there could have been delivery people. There could have been guests of people that live in the apartment coming in and out. However, the important thing here is that the hallway was not deserted at 11 a.m. when this happened. There were people around and no one remembered seeing any sort of struggle. There was no commotion. There was no one saying, "Help me," or "Please stop." There was nothing out of the ordinary, which leads people and authorities to think that Nicole likely either knew this person, trusted this person, or was tricked into going away with whoever took her. Unfortunately, because the police weren't called until 7 hours later, there was very, very little they could do and very little to go on at the time. And to give you an idea as to how much of a gap 7 hours is and what someone can do with it, I'm going to break down a list of locations that this person could have easily traveled to from Toronto. So in 7 hours, they could have gone to Montreal, which is the largest city in Quebec in the province next over to Ontario. They could have gotten to Buffalo, New York in 1.5 hours. They could have driven to Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, which is also in Ontario, in 4.5 hours. They could have gone to Detroit in 4 hours. So clearly, there's a lot of room as to where Nicole could have been taken. She could have crossed borders, and from the States, she could have gone even further south. So at this point, who knows what could have really happened to her. Now, I know a lot of you are probably asking, well, why don't we just check the security cameras? Well, unfortunately, at this time in the 80s, security cameras were not a huge thing, especially inside of the buildings. There were several buildings that did have them outside that watched the entrance so they could see who was coming in and out. But unfortunately, these cameras did not catch Nicole leaving the building. However, if this person did exit through the front door, there were many ways that this person could have concealed Nicole in their exit. I saw a lot of people suggesting several theories that, it could have been a delivery guy and maybe they concealed her in a big box. They could have hid Nicole in a suitcase. She was a very small girl. She was tiny. And it's not hard to imagine them stuffing her into something that could have easily hidden her and then made their exit right in front of everyone and no one noticed a single thing. Now, there was a fourth theory, and some people are speculating about Nicole's mother. Now, she did die in 2007, but Nicole's father is still alive and he still lives in Toronto. And the reason people are pointing some attention towards Nicole's mother is that when she died in 2007, she left an obituary. She actually mentioned her son from a different marriage, her grandchildren, her brother, but she didn't mention anything about Nicole, which people found to be extremely odd. Why would she not mention Nicole in her obituary? A lot of people started speculating and saying that maybe she had something to do with this. Was she covering something up? Was she trying to divert police's attention by placing that note where they found it? Is there a reason why she didn't call the police right away when she was first told that Nicole was nowhere to be found? There's a lot of little holes and loose ends that don't quite add up that do make her look a little bit suspicious. And then lastly, it's also reported that Nicole's mother went back to work 1 week later after Nicole went missing. Now, I know this one is a little bit subjective. You don't really know how people deal with grief, so you can't really tell someone how to behave, especially if they have to depend on their work to pay for their bills. Not everyone's work can give them extended time off. So I don't know about this last one. I mean, it is a little bit hard to believe that someone would be in their right mind to go back to work 1 week after their young daughter goes missing. But we'll never really know what she was thinking now that she has passed away. And sadly, that's where the case leaves us today. To this day, there's still a reward up for Nicole's findings. There have been no other clues aside from the Horseshoe Valley one. And police, the public are completely stumped. This was such a huge case when it happened. And it really did make parents a lot more careful with leaving their children around alone. Let me know what you guys think happened to Nicole. Do you guys think that she actually did make it down? Do you think she was lured away in the lobby? Do you think she was lured away in her apartment hallway upstairs? Was there someone in the elevator with her? We did get confirmation that she did make it down to the lobby, but one person saw her, so it could have easily been mistaken. It could have been someone else. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And if you guys have any other case suggestions, I love hearing your case suggestions. I actually didn't know about this case considering I am Canadian, so this was interesting for me to do research on. So if you guys have any other suggestions, leave them in the comments below and we'll definitely take a look. That does it for today's episode. Thank you guys for joining me and we'll see you in the next one.